Good evening and welcome to tonight's webinar and meeting with the chief. My name's Captain Retired Dan Pionk. I'm the Executive Director of the Navy Supply Corps Foundation and want to welcome you to tonight's webinar. First, we want to just give a little background for our guests and friends who may not know about the foundation, but basically the foundation exists for our leaders and members who are anyone who's worn the oak leaf of the United States Navy Supply Corps. So whether you're a veteran, active duty, reserve, prior service, retired, and we support all of you. We have about 6,000 registered members, and really we're interested in really pushing to get as many supply officers registered as possible. So you'll see some QR codes on these slides. Take a minute tonight or after the webinar and register. There's 20,000 supply officers out there. We've got 6,000 registered, and we're trying to close that gap. So we need your help. But we're here to support all of you. We provide global programs and services, really promoting our heritage and traditions. Our programs are a scholarship program. That's how we were founded in 1970. It's our biggest program. Really proud of that. We've given $7 million in scholarships since 1971, about 3,000 scholarships. So really proud of that. And it continues to be a strong and our biggest program. We also have a heritage program. If you've ever been to San Diego, see the USS Midway, or Norfolk, some of the battleship there, New Jersey and Wisconsin and Philadelphia. We support those heritage programs and those ships to promote the what the Supply Corps does and did on those ships. And so that's another big program. Our next program that we're really proud of and really has taken off is our transition program, and we're pretty proud of that. Last year we had a pilot, a 2-day career transition leadership seminar in Norfolk. This year we're having 3. They're 3 days each. In May, will be in Norfolk, in July, San Diego, in October, someplace in the DC, Philadelphia, Mechanicsburg area. But we really think transition is a service, a value added that we can provide to our members, and really happy that program has taken off. What can we do for you? Well, we're your Supply Corps Connection. We publish a quarterly newsletter, which has lots of articles and information about not only Supply Corps, what's going on within the foundation at our chapter level. It's really a great connection for anybody. We get requests all the time from retirees, active duty commands, the schoolhouse, just because there's so much information in there. We also provide professional and social networking. We've got a great LinkedIn profile and a following there. We try to push really good information there so you can follow just what's going on, again, in the foundation and the Supply Corps. And there's leadership opportunities, both at the chapter level and the foundation level. We have 38 chapters worldwide, and this time of year is our birthday ball. So I'm really proud of that. There were 3 balls last weekend, Japan, Jacksonville, Mechanicsburg. This weekend, Monterey, and in DC. A lot of big events and really a great opportunity to celebrate the 230th birthday of the Supply Corps. So again, take a minute to register tonight. We want to close that gap between 6,000 and 20,000, and we need you to register. With that, it's my pleasure now to turn it over to the chairman of the Navy Supply Corps Foundation, Captain Retired Fast Eddie Fishburne. So Eddie, over to you to introduce our guest speaker.
Okay, hear me, Dan?
Gotcha, Eddie. Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you and welcome tonight. This webinar has always been one of the best attended and one of the more popular ones. So I'm not going to take a lot of time going through Admiral Epps' bio or anything like that. Put it this way, if you don't know who he is, you're probably on the wrong webinar tonight. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Admiral Epps, the 50th Chief of Supply Corps, for some introductory remarks. And what do you have to say tonight?
Okay, hey, good evening. Thank you, Eddie, for that intro. Good evening to everyone. I first want to give a shout out to the team. If you notice behind me, I'm not in Mechanicsburg. So I'm in Norfolk. We were supposed to tape this, I think, in Mechanicsburg or somewhere else. And then I got brought into Norfolk just recently for a tabletop exercise this week. So I really want to give a shout out. You can't see right to my left or off here to the right, but the CO and XO of FLC Norfolk were very accommodating and in setting this up for us here. So I appreciate Kelly and Mordecai, you all doing that. So let me just quickly tell you a couple things. First, kind of why I'm here. The Navy hosts a massive large-scale exercise every year called Large Scale Exercise. It's been going on for a number of years now. I know when I was the 41 in Fleet Forces, that we were in the nascent stages of establishing this exercise, and now we're many years into it. And the premise here is sort of, if the balloon goes up, how is Big Navy going to fight? And so you had, as much as I hate sitting still for 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day in a single seat, sort of no windows in a skiff, it's a really valuable opportunity to engage with our line partners and counterparts across the SysCom. So I'm sitting in a room, if you are familiar with Fleet Forces Command, it's the King Conference Room, so it's the main conference room. At the head table, you've got Admiral Caudle, who is the comm for Fleet Forces. The DCOM, our senior sponsor, was Admiral Scott Swift, who was the previous commander out at the Pacific Fleet, and a room full of general officers, flag officers, and SES. And really the premise is this is the lead up to the exercise later this summer. So this is a primer for the senior leadership, but it's a senior leadership symposium. And a lot of what we did today was both talk about kind of the current challenges that we face across the force, what we're doing to get after those challenges, how the exercise is going to design to really stress test all of our particular arenas that we oversee. And there was a good bit of education. So we got a lot of briefs on kind of at the TS-SCI level, a lot of good briefs on current state of play across the world. So I'm glad I got to sit through that this week, because that's going to, I think, help inform some of the responses that I have today. It's very fresh. Obviously, I have to be sensitive to classification, but I'm really excited to share some of that with you, and hopefully I'll be able to interweave some of that into our discussions. So just a couple of quickies I wanted to just tee up. So I did this last year, so a quick catch up from last year. You know, my 3 areas of focus for both NAVSUP and the Supply Corps have not changed over the last 3 years. Really hyper-focused on the work we've been doing broadly in sustainment. Very important, the work that's been going on that my predecessors initiated, and it's been really the torch that I've wanted to carry, and that I'll continue to carry until I'm done in this job. We've got to get to audit. So we're already in a new calendar year. 2027 is no further away than it was last year. Matter of fact, it's a year closer to where we were. And so audit is going to be really probably the singular event that we've got to jump over and be able to clear that. And Navy supply is really going to lead that effort for the Navy. And then leader development, which is also how do we continue to create an environment for our leaders to thrive, for picking talent, and for making the moves that we need to make to ensure we have the right people where they belong. So that hasn't changed for me. Still super focused on NAVSUP and the Supply Corps and supply. So NAVSUP, the Supply Corps, and supply, all of us. What is our ability to fight? I don't say fight tonight. This could be fight tomorrow. It could be fight a year from now. But really, our ability to fight, and where are all the gaps between the sort of actual tip of the spear, implied tasks that we are meant to do. You would think by this point in time we would have a very clear definition of our role in a warfight, and I'm not saying we don't have that, but it's not as crystal clear as you might think. And so I'm continuing the work that we've been doing to really get after what that means for us doctrinally, what that means for us thematically, and how we can codify what it means for supply to fight. So big effort going on across the enterprise. And then certainly, last but not least, and I use in air quotes, contested logistics, sort of the theme du jour for the last many years, actually more than the last many years, but just sort of this premise that, you know, what happens when all of the things that we're used to having in phase 0 in a peacetime environment, how do the logisticians support the warfighters when we don't have all the things that we're used to? And as like my Vice Commander Kurt Windlekin likes to remind me all the time, there's no such thing as contested logistics. It's always contested. But as we use that terminology to kind of frame how we think about what could challenge our supply community out there when things don't go the way we plan, when things aren't in place where we thought they would be, when we have to be super creative on being able to continue to sustain readiness. All of those challenges across all domains, we kind of wrap up into this term called contested logistics. So I'm going to continue to use that term just as sort of a way to envelop what the concept looks like. I'm actually going to be moderating a panel at Sierra Space this spring on contested logistics, and I've got folks across the spectrum to come speak to that. And then the final thing, and then I'll turn it over to Eddie. So obviously this has been a very busy month for all of us, lots of change. So unless you've been sleeping under a rock, you know what's happening across the military space, obviously with the new administration, lots of changes have been made. So we're just for the folks who are just curious about what's happening with us, it's been chaotic. I actually said during my speech at the ball on Saturday that last week was probably one of the hardest I had. There's a lot of churn we're going through, a lot of people uncertain about what's happening and, really concerned about where we are, where the Navy's going, what's their future going to be like. And so as the commander of NAVSUP, and certainly as the chief, their concerns were my concerns. So having to address that in the town hall, standing room only town hall, but knowing that people beyond the town hall also feel all those same emotions. It's been a trying week, and that's our job as leaders to help them get through that with the resources that we've got. We've got, the changes come fast and furious, and it isn't done yet. And I'll just tell you without specifics, we've got certain people cuts that you've heard about in the news. We are living through that. I just got the latest update on kind of where we are across the NAVSUP enterprise, which is just a smidgen of the Navy. But I kind of have a sense now for how many people will be leaving voluntarily, how many people we're going to have to let go. And then if you marry that with the budget cuts that have been levied on us, something's going to give. So what I would really tell you is, for me, and this goes into my last two comments, I need to know what NAVSUP is going to look like after these people moves and these resourcing moves are made. The NAVSUP that we were before could still be, for all intents and purposes, the same NAVSUP, but I don't know until the dust is settled. And we can take a good look at the people that we lost, coupled with the inability to backfill behind them, is going to leave a gap in capability. And as great as we are at saying, hey, we can always find a way by hook or by crook to get stuff done, I just don't know what that's going to look like until the dust is settled. So that's going to be of a concern to me. And then the final thing, obviously, is we've got a new chairman nominee. We've got a new CNO who will be announced here. I don't know when, but eventually. And the question for us will be, we've been following the last two CNOs. Their guidance to us has been very similar. I would say last CNO 33's guidance was an iteration on her predecessors. And why that was easy for us is that we had consistency across two CNOs. And so we have definitely made the investment in time and creativity and resources and war planning based on that. And the question we have to ask ourselves now is not, will there be change? How dramatic will the change be? And how quickly can we adapt to that? And that's going to be on us to be able to adapt to where the new direction is going to go. So there's a lot on our plate there, but that's kind of where we are now, Eddie, and I'll open up for questions.
Okay. Well, we have a lot of questions that were submitted ahead of time, and we'll try to get through as many as we can, and I'll combine some because some of them do cross over. But without changing topics, I just want to know if you want to go a little deeper on one thing. It kind of ties into one of the questions. You have addressed it a bit, but please comment on the disruptions in the civilian staffing at the supply centers and shipyards, and any support available from the reserve community. That kind of ties into what we were just talking about.
That's good. So Here's the thing, there are disruptions, but the disruptions, we kind of got early on in this process, say, hey, you all heard about all the things that came out, hey, click on this button this Saturday, and if you don't click on it, a laser beam's gonna come down and get you, and that never happened. The truth of the matter is, we got very aggressive goals about, which people we need to target and to take a look at across the civilian force. Fortunately, we were also granted the ability to ask for exemptions. So we were able to apply exemptions to a lot of the people who were originally going to be targeted early on. And this was helpful. And one example would be military spouses. So if you're working remotely and you're a military spouse, you got an exemption from being sort of in that category of people that we may lose. And so we've really been able to winnow down and refine that number to something that is much less than I think we initially thought it would be. But the impact to both NAVSUP, to any of our S3s, FLC, BSC, NEXCOM, for the most part, was given a granted blanket waiver. So because they're non-appropriated, right, they got a blanket waiver. So Rob Bianchi and his team have been exempted there. But then the shipyards too, I believe they got a good amount, not a total waiver, I don't think, but they got a waiver as well. So the impact on them will be marginal. And so back to kind of NAVSUP and the FLCs, we're really not going to know that the largest group of people, I think, who are leaving are those who are leaving voluntarily. And so there's always a combination of reasons why people choose to leave. Oftentimes, many of them were near leaving anyways. They were planning to retire this year, maybe, and I'm just kind of talking about one category. And so getting the option to have administrative leave for the rest of the summer just probably accelerates their retirement planning. But in terms of us being super impacted by it, most of those people were already transitioning their work and had already found successors and had already done pass downs. So my sense is, ideally, we won't be dramatically impacted by losing that one key person. But I don't know what I don't know yet. And so we have to wait until the dust settles. We have not had to tap into our reserve forces yet. And so we have not had to use that as any kind of a fill. Time will tell where that works. But I'll tell you, Eddie, since I last talked, well, it was in play before, but the last Chief of Naval Reserve really changed the paradigm on the reserves. His favorite saying was "no more free chicken." We kind of grew up and we were able to, if we had a gap somewhere, we could call up a reservist and fill it, and it was easy day. And Admiral Mustin, and I think Admiral LaCour, who's the new Chief of Naval Reserve, I think her sense is now she's going to carry on with his work, and their work is, this isn't about reserves filling gaps in your requirements. This is about the reserve being ready to mobilize and fight at a moment's notice. And that means that in many ways, they're not going to be available as they were before. They're still available for the fight, but they're not available to close a gap in ways that we were accustomed to previously.
Okay, yeah. There were several questions about artificial intelligence. And they kind of revolve around talking about how it can impact efficiency in the supply system and the supply core. Can you address that? How we'll be using artificial intelligence and any impact it may have?
Yes. AI is one of those things, and sometimes I loop in AI with, I use Chat GPT as my proxy for all things AI. But, AI has got a lot of promise. I think people are scared of AI, and there are people who embrace AI for what it will be. And what I've said publicly this last year, and I still believe it, I've seen a lot of promising technologies that can help us. But for me now, the AI that we need, and I'll use at NAVSUP as an example, would be an AI that can really connect dots and recognize patterns in ways that our current predictive technology can't do now. The holy grail for us is determine the day before a part's going to break and have that replacement or have a repaired part ready in place to go in, and then we yank that out, wash, rinse, and repeat. And I don't think there's anything that has shown a demonstrably better way to predict failure rates in the last year. And I'm not saying that that's not out there. I've done a lot of reading on Palantir, and I just use one company as an example because they got profiled in the paper last Sunday or 2 Sundays ago. And a lot of their AI predictive technology has really helped in the warfighting realm, sort of with drones and sort of with the ability to to do actual on the battlefield last minute maneuver changes that AI has enabled them. I think in our little bit more prosaic world that we live in, for me, the ultimate holy grail will be when AI can help us do predictions on failure rates so that we can optimize the supply system in a way that's going to, again, get that broken part, get a new part before it breaks the day before. Now, I will tell you a way where AI does show a lot of promise, and it's going to be actually in NAVSUP at WSS, where we're tinkering with an AI technology that is targeting our contracting officers, both civilians and military. And the intent of this AI technology that we want to exploit is helping our contracting officers. There's a lot of administration that you've got to run through to adhere to FAR requirements, and there's a lot of run up in building a contract that can oftentimes take days and weeks and what seems like months. And we're hoping that we're going to be able to employ AI to accelerate how quickly a lot of that, what I don't want to call the dumb work, but just the grunt work of contracts, how quickly we can get that to accelerate and close the gap on closure time so that our contracting people can do the really elegant work in contracting, which is in sort of negotiations and getting best bang for the buck and actually getting a vendor who can meet our requirements. So I gave you one example of where I think we need to go with AI. It's not there yet, but I also gave you an example of where we're going to employ it. It's got great promise, Eddie, but like I said, until we can put something into Chat GPT and it spits out the perfect answer, I'm not going to throw away my abacus or my slide rule yet.
Okay, so this is not totally related, but is this Navy supply system tracking to provide the heavy lift of achieving the CNO's goal of 80% mission capable ships?
Yes, so for those of you who aren't familiar with that, we have been operating on what we call sort of warfare North Stars. And this is a paradigm change that we've adopted probably in the last 3-4 years. It's all blurring to me now. But what's important about this paradigm shift is that it has taken, and I'll use our community as the example, it has taken our supply community and it's forced us to divorce our status quo way of looking at life, which is what's the fill rate for supply? How full are our shelves? And if our shelves are full and we get a blue E on the SMI, good on us. Like, we were very self-congratulatory. Meanwhile, if there's no direct correlation and impact between what we do in our storerooms versus the warfighters' needs, then it's all been for naught. And that was part of the sustainment transformation that we've adopted in the last couple of years. Is we have now put those to the side. Shelf health matters, but what really matters is how our supply engagements result in an outcome that impacts readiness. And the way for us to do that is to have a North Star that says, what is our macro goal? So this started with Jim Mattis back in 2017-18. He said, I want 80% of tactical fighter jets up, MC, no discussion. The services got there, Navy got there 3 years later. And so now, after having been able to accomplish that, we want to do the same thing both for submarines. So we have a similar North Star in the submarine world, and then we have one in the surface world, which is 80% of, and it's been revised even since then. So it's 80% combat ready, combat surge ready combatants are full up round and ready to go. And so the beauty of that is we have a number. We know how many ships make 80%, so that's an easy number to come up with. And then we have a very objective, data-driven, mathematical decision tree. There are 8 driver trees. I dream about this all the time. There are 8 driver trees in the surface world between the beginning of a requirement and achieving that North Star goal. And I've got to be accountable, or I've got to create the conditions for all 8 of those driver trees to be successful so that we can effectuate hitting that North Star. So long answer there, but I think we're well on our way. We got much more work to do, but we're well on our way.
Okay, there's several questions that kind of deal with what's been going on in the last couple of weeks. And I think I don't want to not get to those. I think they're important to get to. So the first one is, what's the plan for reducing the budget by 8% for the next 5 years, as was tasked by SecDef? And I guess that's tied into another way of saying it is the what is it, the $50 billion reduction.
Right.
Is there a plan? What's the plan?
Yeah, so there isn't. So everyone knows what we call that. We call it bogey in the Pentagon East, but there's a number that we've got to hit. And at some point, we're going to all get together and sort of come up with our idea of what we think is the best way to hit it. And then the deciders will decide if our way was the best way. What I can tell you, and this is relatively public knowledge, there's a system in the Pentagon that keeps track of the budget and the POM, and it gives very discrete detail on every penny we spend in our Navy budget. It's a system called PBIS. So I won't restate all of it, but essentially we're going to have to look at what we offer up as what the 8% drill will do versus what the folks in the Pentagon have already notionally mapped out is an option to get to 8%, and then we'll look at which one is the most effective and least negatively impacted to either NAVSUP or the Navy or all or both of those broadly. But 8% is still a significant amount of money. It's operations and maintenance money, which means it's the money that we get from our resource sponsor to do the things that we do. And really, if you think about it, it's mostly tied to the things that we do through the FLCs. So it is of concern to me because that, the FLCs are the face of NAVSUP. And so a reduction in our resources there is going to result in a reduction in something. And I don't know what that is yet, but that's going to be challenging for us, and we're going to have to deal with that when it comes to fruition.
Okay, kind of tied to that, but along the same lines, do you see tariffs and other trade restrictions having any impact on the supply system?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I'm not an economist. I'd love to play one on TV. And I know that ultimately all these things are 4th and 5th degrees away from kind of directly impacting us. So I can't call that immediate tier, but certainly, and depends on, Econ 101, a tariff normally results in an input to a production process going up. That's an irrefutable, Samuelson's Econ 101 would tell you that. So for us, if we see a rise in the unit cost of a production input, that will mean that our stuff is going to be more expensive, whether that's a repair, whether that's a spare, whether that's us buying food from a prime vendor. All those things could impact us. So yes, of course, if there is an increase in the production inputs, then we're going to see an increase on the other end of the cost of things. That will be the impact there. But have we thought about that in a sort of a strategic way? I would say no. And just because we've been probably a little bit more myopic in looking at the things that are the headlights that's nearest to us.
Okay. So here's one. This is probably one of the bigger hot button ones. How's the Supply Corps leadership going to continue to support diversity and equity in the current environment?
Yeah. So the administration, the leadership came in and gave us a very specific mandate about where our focus should be, and that's on warfighting, lethality, and warrior preparedness. And so we are doing that. We have done everything we've been asked to do so far, and we'll continue to do that. And I guess my answer to it, and I've said this before, you know, the leader that I am today in 2025 is the same leader I was when I was at FLC Pearl Harbor in 2015 to 2017. And who is the same leader I was on the USS Carl Vinson from 2009 to 11, who is the same leader I was when I taught dispersing from 1994 to 1996 in Athens, Georgia, to the same leader I was when I was a junior officer on the USS Kitty Hawk from 90, 91 to 94. All of the same values that I had then, I have now. None of them have changed. The notion of having dignity and respect for all individuals, for finding the best talent and for nurturing them, and for really creating this Big Ten environment where, hey, you got the talent, you got the motivation and the drive to do well. We've always looked for those people to nurture and grow. That's no different today than it was a month ago, than it was 6 months ago, than it was 8 months ago. So I feel that way. I know that my peers in the flag wardroom feel that way. I know that those leadership values existed in the supply corps and across supply well before the last couple of years. And so I'm full steam ahead. I have no issues because nothing got changed for me before. I was the same guy, and nothing's going to change for me tomorrow and Monday when I get back in the office.
So from a leadership perspective, what advice do you have for leaders who are trying to help their teams, which are obviously, there's going to be a lot of cynicism and anger in the current environment? What's your advice for leaders?
Yeah. I think it's what I do. One, we've got to remain steady and calm and make sure that we don't let emotions overtake our decision making. The way I try to approach that is, we're doing this tonight, but I try to be really radically transparent when it comes to communications. And this is a forum that works because this is the way we can reach an audience across time zones. But my favorite medium by which to exhibit the behaviors that I want to and kind of quell concern is face-to-face live forums. Not ideal, but doable if you put the time into it. And so I'm a big fan of walking out, making sure I'm connecting with my team, doing town halls, which are really effective, and doing them in person because you can say something, you can type an email, you can do a video on social media, but folks really get a sense for where you are, where your head is, what your intentions are when they see you in person, and they can not only hear what you're saying, but read your face, read all your nonverbal cues, and get a real sense for the sincerity of where you're at. And so I would encourage anyone who is worried and wants to make sure their team feels engaged, involved, be radically transparent, and you cannot over communicate, and over communicating will steer you in the right direction.
Okay. And finally, on this topic, a little bit on this topic still, do you foresee the Supply Corps doing more interagency and corporate cooperation because of the new administration?
That's a good question. So it's funny, we talked about the interagency this morning. And for those of you who aren't, many of you are JPME, but if you're not, the notion of whole of government and interagency is just how, obviously not just us working joint, but across different departments. And so this question is an interesting one because I don't know yet. I will share this one tidbit with you. This morning, we were talking, and it was in a secret environment, but we were talking about what it's going to take to beat our near peer adversaries. And one of the concepts that got thrown up in this discussion, if you've been to JPME or a service college, you know it, it's the notion of the dime, right? So the superpowers have this thing called the dime, which they can employ to achieve the means that they want to do. And the DIME is an acronym for your 4 DIME elements are diplomacy, information, military means, or economic means. So for a country like the United States of America, there are four main elements that we can employ to achieve the ends we want. Again, diplomacy, information, military, or economic, DIME, DIME. And one of the notions that we talked about today was really the importance of economics and how, you talked about tariffs earlier, but we also have to look at things that we're doing to change the geopolitical calculus and make the notion of a conflict less liable than it is today. So, and this is, again, anyone who's been following it, if you look at Taiwan as a scenario, if you weren't at Skillsys last year, then you may not know this. Everyone at Skillsys, the Supply Corps Senior Leadership Symposium, knows this because the writer of the book was one of our guest speakers, but there was a book called Chip War that came out last year. We had the author speak to us, and essentially, there are many reasons why Taiwan is going to be a hot button, but one of the principal reasons is a very high-end chip maker who is in Taiwan. And so the question became there, what if we change that dynamic, and what if that chip making capability were resident in Silicon Valley, or even somewhere not like Silicon Valley, Salt Lake City, which has got a really burgeoning software tech industry. Now, the problem with that is once you read the book, you would think we Americans can do anything, and we can do anything, but making these really bespoke high-end computer chips is extremely hard. It is going to be extremely hard and expensive even for us. And while we can do it, it's going to take years to do that. And what we can't afford as a globalized economy is to have any interruption of those very high-end chips. Because as you saw during COVID, what stopped GM from pumping out a bunch of cars, and I use GM as just one example, is they ran out of chips that ran the most basic functions on the car, but that last piece of the supply chain that got stuck set Detroit back significantly. Can you imagine where the global economy and would be if we lost those very specific chips, which really are the engine, they really are the fuel that run life for us today. Your iPhone, your microwave, your car, everything. And so we can't afford a gap in that supply chain. And it's going to be years before we could even replicate what TSMC does.
Okay, so you brought up next near peer adversary. Couple questions that tie to that. What's the biggest change that our forces need to make to prepare for anything with our next near peer adversary?
Yeah, we don't have enough time for that today. I think the issue for us, what's been helpful for us in the last 2 years, year and a half, 2 years, is really the living battle lab that's been the Red Sea. If you look at the Carney, but all of our ships now, which have been under attack in the Red Sea from the Houthis using autonomous attack mediums, that's been kind of a real game changer for us. But on the good side, well, one, we've been very good at sort of knocking down whatever gets thrown at us. So that's been good, but at a price. So we've had to pay a price because those SM2s and SM3s and SM6s are not cheap. But it's also giving us a living battle lab to really determine, what it would. We haven't had our ships fired on in a long time, so that's been good practice for us. Now, I'm not comparing what's happening in the Red Sea with what's probably going to happen to a near peer competitor, because the sophistication and the advanced military power and arsenal that our competitor has is leagues beyond what we've seen. And so for us, it's really going to come down to we've got to have plans are important, but the planning is the more important part of a numbered battle plan. And we've really got to look at the arsenal and the Navy that we have now, the power that it brings, and how we can use that in its current configuration, factor in all of the challenges that we may face vis-a-vis, hey, if we lose TAKE support, what happens if we can't replenish a carrier strike group? what happens if we have to rearm a carrier strike group, a DDG with TLAMs, you name it. If we lose our primary avenues for doing that like we do now, what is our alternative? And if we know what that alternative is, how refined and practiced is that way to do it? And I don't know that we're fully there yet. This gets around the contested logistics thing, and I think for us, it's going to be really critical for us to be not only creative but forward thinking and planning, because we can't afford to learn it in real time. And as I've said many a time, as you look at the conflict in Ukraine, I don't think that the length of that conflict was ever anticipated, and so we want to avoid that at all costs.
With the world situation, is there any plans to restore any supply function activity in Guam?
There is. It hasn't been fully formed yet, so the activity really has to do with the resources that we're putting in Guam. So if you study that AOR and you look at the first, second island chains and sort of concentric circles that we like to map out on maps to show, where weaponry can certainly reach now, Guam is going to be critically important to us. And then certainly from an operational energy standpoint, Anderson Air Force Base, we used to have Red Hill in Hawaii that has been dispersed across the theater, but Anderson will play a critical role in operational energy. But yes, we are moving resources there. We are part of a senior level flag SES group that is looking at the laydown, what the future looks like there. But I'll tell you, more interestingly, we're almost more focused now on AUKUS, so the relationship that we have with Australia to provide them with Virginia class submarines. We're doing both of those now, and so we're seeing our footprint increase in that area, both in Australia, the supply chain to Australia, and then also in Guam.
Okay, as we get towards the end here, I have a few questions I want to get into, more personnel related.
Sure.
We recently had a distinguished alumni call where we have a new advisory board where we engage our distinguished alums. And one of them actually asked, and I thought this would be a good question to ask you, what is the session as well as retention look like in the Supply Corps these days?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So it's a perfect timing because we had a banner year this last 2 years. We've got an awesome team in Millington, OP and OCM, and we went through a couple of years where sessions were not great, but we've turned that around and they are great now. And then, like Eddie, when you and I were in Athens, really the pipeline of people coming in are much different than when we grew up. I went to the Naval Academy a couple of weeks ago for service selection night, and I loved every one of them. But we only had like 5 Supply Corps officers coming from Annapolis, so the predominance are coming from almost all from OCS. And I get to visit every ensign who comes into the Navy, so I get to the schoolhouse and visit them either before they leave for graduation and certainly before they get out of their final class there. And I'm really encouraged by what I see, the energy of the students, the excitement of joining the Supply Corps community. We have a number of prior enlisted folks in there. And it's just good to see the mix of people coming in. I'm very encouraged there. So the quality is great, and the accession pipeline is very good as well. So I'm encouraged by that. And one just tidbit for folks here. So I didn't really appreciate this until I got in this job. So, I used to think, well, if you just got permission from the CNO, you could turn on a spigot and bring in more people. And it's not that easy. The limiting factor for us is that we can only bring in enough ensigns to fill operational billets for an ensign. So in order for us that's the 99% of it. And then we can bring lateral transfers and what are called POCers in later on. But almost everyone is brought in as an ensign through the BQC, and that seat count is driven by the number of operational units they can get to. So the way to fix that near term is if we can get more people on operational units, that's good. Really happy. I remember when Admiral Heinrich talked, I worked for him 10 years ago, and he really was trying to get ensigns on LCS. We finally got that. I was at orders reading a couple of weeks ago, and we got a bunch going to LCS. That is one more opportunity for us to get our supply officers on there. So overall, the input into the supply corps is good, it's healthy, and then coupled with the work that we're doing to get the community help right. I don't have time to speak about it now, but we're doing some shaping of the community pyramid to get it back into a pyramid. I think once that work is complete, coupled with the accessions we're getting, everything looks good for the community in terms of a talent coming in.
And retention good?
Retention is good. Retention has been a mixed bag, but overall, I would characterize our retention is good. Retention in terms of how we measure people who leave after critical junctures. So, obviously, we want everyone to stay until at least 20, and that's a factor. But then, in order to stay in at 20, you've got to hit a certain pay grade, and there are different step functions away from that. But by and large, our retention numbers are very solid. And what I sense, Eddie, when I'm out in the fleet and talking with people, are that people are excited about being in the supply corps, being in the Navy. Now, let me not make this just a rosy picture. The folks are tough. Deployments like you and I used to go on 6 months, come back in, wash, rinse, and repeat. There are folks on strike groups now, and deployments go on 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months. So it's very hard on people. It's hard on the system. It's hard on their families. I don't want to sort of sugarcoat that at all. It remains very challenging to serve today, and we just do everything we can to help them get through that and see the long-term benefits and not the short-term pain.
It's interesting you brought up that guy Heinrich. I think he asked a couple questions here.
Okay.
He asked about promotion rates.
Yeah.
And he also asked about the status of the fuel subspecialties.
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise.
Okay. Yeah, I can answer. I'll do the promotion rates first. So promotion rates are another thing that I never thought about. I wasn't an oak detailer. I just whatever it was, I wanted to be inside that term radius of the promotion rate. But promotion rates are oftentimes a function of needing to keep people around. So usually if your demand exceeds your supply, or if you want more opportunities than there are, then the promotion rates will be lower. If we have to lower the bar to keep more people in, then the promotion rates are going to be higher. That's one example of how that works. And then similarly, our supply corps pyramid is a little bit distorted. And what's the second order effect of that distortion? And really quickly, the distortion comes from, we have too many billets in the 06, 05, and 04 pay range based on the number of ensigns we can bring in. So that seems like not an issue until you realize it creates this giant sucking sound, and it pulls people artificially early up into the promotion pyramid. And then it creates a third order effect when if a couple of variables are off, it can make the zone sizes and promotion opportunities artificially either low or high. And what we've experienced for the last couple of years, and Admiral Heinrich and I talked about this at one point, the promotion rates have been really high. So to the tune of 90, 95% at the 04 level. And so that's good if you're in zone and you want to get the next rank, that's awesome, right? But the question we have to ask ourselves is, we want to get a selective cut to make sure, one, we're getting the right folks, and two, we're getting folks enough preparation to advance to that next level. So it's not just that you sit around for 6 or 7 years and you're an instant lieutenant commander. You need to make sure you run through the right traps there. So there's that. And then for the fuel folks, so the 1307s, as I told Vice Admiral Gray today, we were sitting in the TTX together, and I said, hey, sir, as I said at the beginning, we were transferring the fuel operations to the regions. Operational energy is what we call it in the joint parlance, but fuels officers have been important, are currently important, and will remain important for the absolute foreseeable future. That skill set is incredibly vital. The three commodities that are going to stop a war immediately. Take all the sexy combat stuff planning out, the three things that are going to take us down are food, ordnance, and fuel. So if you just want to be attached to something that's important, being able to operate in that realm will keep you, that's the best job security there is.
As a former AOE SUPO, I resemble that comment.
Very good.
Okay, I have a couple questions. We'll wrap up about, and they're actually about reserve questions and a session. Do you have any advice for civilians interested in becoming supply officers in the Navy Reserve?
Yes, they have a program called DCO, Direct Commission Officer Program. What I recommend you do, if you're interested, go on the NAVSUP webpage or the OP webpage. There's a link on there that'll have something tied to DCO. Click on there and we'll take you down the path to apply. But it's a great way for those dedicated patriots who want to come on board. They want to keep their day job, but also want to serve in uniform. The DCO program is the best way to do that.
So interesting. We had a question come in online. Dan sent it to me.
Yeah.
Several of the FY 24 and 25 direct commission supply corps officer selects are on the call tonight. What would you tell these reservists as they start their supply corps careers?
Wow. One, I would tell you, welcome to the community first. Here's what I'd share with you. My experience in the supply corps has been unique in that I think that we do the connection between the reserve community and the active community better than anyone else. I'm biased and I also have not been anything else. So I'm talking a little bit out of turn here, but I just am really encouraged by my own personal experience and what I see now. The people growing up, who I grew up with, many of my mentors, you look at the Sharon Redpaths of the world, Alan Reyes, who was a peer of mine coming up into the Navy, he decided at one point to go reserve and he eventually became a flag officer. And throughout that whole journey, there was never, it just didn't even dawn on me that Alan was a reserve officer. Now, although I know he had a day job at the USO, a very important job, and he just did both. And so I think that mindset that I got brought up in and that we live in exists today, that the RC-AC connection could not be any tighter. And as a matter of fact, at NAVSUP, so Admiral Jackie McClellan is the deputy commander at NAVSUP. I've got her in charge of our how we fight and can we fight campaign. And I think that also symbolically just shows you the importance that I put her in charge of that, not only because she's extremely capable and will see it to fruition, but she will also lend an eye toward how the reserve can absolutely complement and buttress what we're doing. It's so critical to what we're doing that I would have been foolish not to have included her in there. And so that just really symbolizes throughout my career how integrated we have been with the reserve. And so I encourage you to embrace that. You want to find your Alan Reyes. You want to find your Jackie McClellan. You want to find an active duty senior mentor who you admire. Don't just get a reserve mentor. Find somebody on the active side who can mentor you as well, because we're just really really blind to those letters in our name.
And I would say, in my time, back when I was an ensign all the way through my active duty time, I don't see there's anything that's changed more drastically than that. It is so different from when I was a young officer, the reserve integration.
Right.
One final question, and it is actually tied to that, and I think it's a great one to end on before you give some closing comments. There's someone on the call who's applying to OCS, pursuing a supply corps commission. How do you evaluate a great fit candidate? What would you look for in a great fit for the supply corps?
That's a good question. I think what I look for is a desire to serve and help. And the reason I say that is because I think people expect me to say, oh, well, someone who has a business degree or an accountant. And I would tell you, those are helpful, but really rather meaningless to me in the grand scheme of things. I mean, no, and I say that a bit tongue in cheek. We will train you how to be a supply officer. What I can't train is somebody who has that servant leadership mentality. We're in the supply corps. We are equal partners with our line brethren, but we're in a supporting role, and we're there to make them succeed. And so I think someone who comes in with that mindset already is someone I'm going to immediately identify as would be particularly good for our community. So I think somebody who is about a problem solver and who is about helping other people achieve their objectives, that's who I want in the Supply Corps. We'll teach you the 487, 485, everything else, but you got to be about the people and helping our partner trigger pullers, line operators succeed. You help them succeed, we're winning all day.
Well, I thank you. This was great. We're right on time. Do you have any closing comments before I do a final commercial from the foundation?
Sure. No, I appreciate your time here. I wish I could do this in person and see the faces and we could have opened the chat box. I appreciate some of the emojis we saw here, good and bad. But what I just want to leave you with, hey, folks, the Supply Corps is in great shape. I've been at this job now for, I'm coming up this summer at my I got a year left when I get to this summer. I am so, I said this in my speech on Saturday, no matter where I go, no matter what sailors I see, no matter what civilians I work with, no matter if I'm sitting with the CNO or the VCNO or any of the flag officer leadership, man, we've got a lot of credibility. And I'm just riding off the credibility of our community. But I absorb the good. When it's good for us, I absorb the good. When it's bad for us, I absorb the bad. And mostly what I get now is wonderful. And so I want to tell you all, people are really high on the Supply Corps, what we're doing. Am I saying we're perfect? No. But what I'm saying is, man, we are at the table and in a place that I haven't been in my 35 years in uniform. It is wonderful. And that's because you guys are bringing it and you're leveling up on our game. And so I encourage you to keep doing that. Change is going to come. We're going to adapt to change and we're going to be great. I got no concerns about our future. So keep your eye on the prize, keep focused, keep taking care of each other, keep striving to be the best leaders. Everything else will take care of itself.
Well, thank you very much. I just want you to know how proud I am of you. It makes me feel great to see somebody who went through Supply Corps school. And I know we have other contemporaries of mine who were staff members at Athens when you went through who are also as proud of you. And I thank you for this and I thank you for all you're doing. I do want to take 1 second to just ask everybody, please, I will first thank you for all you've done for the foundation. We had a great year last year. I'm looking forward to another great year this year. Do me a favor, register if you're not registered with the foundation and call 5 of your friends and tell them to register. A lot of people think they're registered, they're not. If you're not registered, go on that website, get us your information so we can communicate with you, because that's how we find out and that's how you find out what's going on and what the Supply Corps Foundation is doing for you. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Drive safely. Take care.